Now we are coming to the last step in secondary growth, and when we come to this last step, we have one term that is new and we need to understand it in detail, its composition, how it is formed. The term is periderm. Alright. As you can make it out, it is something related to layers because derm word is here. Few more terms which comprise the periderm, that is phloem, second is Phallogen, and third is Phalloderm. Read these, learn these, and just put these in your mind. We have to understand what is this periderm. As in the previous lesson when I ended it, I had an intriguing question for you, that what happens to the outer layers which surrounded the vascular bundles. They would require many changes I would say, to accommodate such a change that is taking place inside the vascular bundles due to activity of the cambium. These three things, they have to be accommodated within the periphery of the epidermis. Alright, so there should be some activity in the cortical layers as well, which would be able to accommodate whatever activity takes place in the cambial ring. So we have four new terms. Now first thing is this, that the first term that I introduced to you in this lesson itself is formed by these three. So what is periderm? Periderm is phloem plus Phallogen plus Phalloderm. Now supposedly you start from outside of a tree trunk. Firstly you are going to find phloem, secondly you are going to find Phallogen, thirdly you are going to find Phalloderm. Now this has nothing to do with activity of cork cambium, what is written as the fourth point. Now you come across a term known as cork. You must have come across this term, you must have played at some stage in your life with the cork cricket ball usually, or we have cork which is put inside champagne bottles and it pops up, and you must have seen it in movies or in real life as well. So what is that cork? That cork is suberized wood. Alright, it is wood only and it has lot of suberin in it. What is suberin? Suberin you can call as waxy material. Now as you can see in this term, there is something which is associated with cork, and this cork has something to do with cambium. Now in the beginning we had talked about what cambium was. Cambium was a type of meristematic tissue. Now this cork cambium, first of all, please understand, it is secondary meristematic tissue which is found in cortical layers. So probably it has got its name cork from the cortical word itself. It is secondary meristematic tissue found in the cortical layers. Now try to recall your knowledge from the Dicotstem's TS that we had drawn. It had many layers of cortex, and what were the cortical layers made up of? They were made up of parenchymatous tissue. That means in order to accommodate whatever is happening due to the activity of the primary cambium, parenchymatous cells of the cortex have to become meristematic and form another cambium within the cortical layers known as cork cambium. Now this cork cambium otherwise is known as Phallogen. Alright, so now you can relate a bit with this term which was quite new. The cambium that is formed by the dedifferentiation of parenchymatous cells of the cortical layers becomes cork cambium. Whatever lies outside to cork cambium towards the periphery, towards the epidermis, is known as cork. And the other name for cork is phloem. Okay, it is dead material, it gets suberized. The dead cells, they easily have accumulated suberin in them, and that is known as phloem. Now moving inwards, The cork cambium, because it is cambium and its activity is like the cambium that we have studied earlier, where it gives rise to secondary xylem towards inside and secondary phloem towards outside. This cork cambium also gives rise to cells of cork towards outside and parenchymatous cells which are having chloroplast in them, which perform this function of photosynthesis at times, which are present for storage of material, known as secondary cortex. Why it is secondary? Because the previously formed cortex was of primary origin. It was formed by primary meristem. Now because this cork cambium is meristematic, but because it has been derived from the previously formed cells, it is secondary meristem, and whatever it is forming secondary cortex towards inside. So these three layers which comprise secondary cortex, the cork cambium which gives rise to the secondary cortex towards inside and cork towards outside, these three layers are known as periderm. So I hope you get an idea what we are talking about. So we have the activity of cork cambium as the last step in the secondary growth, where due to activity of cambial ring, the outer cortical cells, they become dedifferentiated, they form a cambial ring. That means they become meristematic. That cambial ring gives rise to cork cell towards outside, that means towards the epidermis, and they give rise to the secondary cortex, which are parenchymatous cells, towards inside. So by the end of this entire secondary growth, what do we have and in what arrangement we have these layers? Let us see. We have, supposedly this is the outer epidermis. Outer is epidermis, we just put it that way. When we move further, as I told you, we have cork, layer of cork. Then we have the cork cambium. Alright, what is cork cambium giving rise to towards inside? That is secondary cortex. What lies inside secondary cortex? All those pericycle and endodermis, they do get crushed. So beneath secondary cortex, or I would say inward to secondary cortex, there lies the primary phloem, which is almost crushed. Okay, inside to primary phloem, there lies secondary phloem. Inner to that, there lies cambium, that is vascular cambium, which formed the cambial ring. Inner to that, yet inner to that, lies the secondary xylem, and yet inner to that lies primary xylem, which is almost crushed. And of course there would be pith. So if this is the way I can represent it, it is quite vague. I am going to write it. If supposedly you start from outside till the center, we are going to transverse the entire radius of a tree trunk. What we are going to find, let's see that. As a result of secondary growth, now what has happened, how the radius of tree trunk has changed. See, we have to start from here and reach till here. Let this be center part. This is highly reduced pith. Okay, then we have the primary xylem, which is also highly reduced. Then we have the secondary xylem, which occupies maximum space. Then we have the vascular cambium, which gave rise to secondary xylem. This is the central part. We are transversing the radius of a tree trunk. This vascular cambium gave rise to secondary xylem towards inside, and outside it gave rise to the secondary phloem, which is less than the secondary xylem. It has highly crushed the primary phloem, which was previously formed. Now, outer to the primary phloem, because secondary phloem and this all is crushing, the pericycle and endodermis have also been crushed. Primary phloem has the secondary cortex, or otherwise known as phalloderm. Alright. Then we have outer to secondary cortex, we have Cork Cambium, right? This Cork Cambium is otherwise known as Phallogen. Outer to Cork Cambium lies cork, that is known as phallem, and this is epidermis, which would be broken. So this is all what we get in the end of the secondary growth in Dicotstem. This keeps on growing, and as I told you how annual rings are formed, further and further xylem would be added. Two types of xylem, early wood and late wood, and we come to the end of secondary growth in Dicotstem. The next topics would include what is bark, how lenticels are formed, but how growth takes place, what is the physiological role of various meristematic tissues that we have come across, and I hope you have understood it in a better way. For complete understanding in visual retreat, I would say, there would be a presentation, and that would help you understand it in a better way, because I believe my diagrams could not be that descriptive as the slide show would be. So thank you for watching.